Let's look at 2024. Let's look at vice president. Let's look at president. And let's look at 2028 with presidential campaign manager and counselor and Fox News contributor Kellyanne Conway here on The Will Cain Show. Hey, Kellyanne.
And Will Cain friend. How are you doing, Will?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you on the show today. I think you're the perfect guest to talk about what drove the news cycle for the past 72 hours over the weekend. And it is something that happened right here on the Will Cain Show. It is that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson declined to repeat his endorsement for Joe Biden in 2024. I'm curious, having been inside campaigns, Kellyanne, how important do you think it is, or how unimportant do you think it is, that a celebrity as big, and he's the most followed man in America, a celebrity as big of The Rock made that statement to me here about Joe Biden?
It's huge. And I was also at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia watching WrestleMania XL on Saturday night. And of course, the final piece of the program was The Rock going out there in the ring. So I think it's incredibly important, Will, because he didn't just unendorse Joe Biden and go quietly into the night. He explained why. He said he's not doing that again for two main reasons. Number one, he thinks that Joe Biden has divided America. And number two, he's so tired of woke. And I know he said many other things to you and to others who have interviewed him, but it's incredibly important when somebody stands up, speaks up, puts up, and shows up. And he did that politically. You have a lot of celebrities who don't like Donald Trump, who endorsed Joe Biden, endorsed Hillary Clinton, gave them money, et cetera, who then sort of, if you ask them, hey, what do you think of Kamala Harris? Or, hey, what do you think of Joe Biden's ability, agility, and acuity? They want to talk to you about your kids and the weather. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, came out and is forcefully telling people why he made a mistake and won't do it again. And you hear that from many voters. I think when you see so many of the core constituencies of the Democratic Party and the Democratic electorate leaving Joe Biden, considering voting for Donald Trump, obviously Hispanic Americans, African Americans, young people, some women, political independents, definitely. If you listen to them tell you why, it sort of mirrors what Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, is saying.
You know, Kellyanne, I have to say after that conversation, I didn't come away with the impression of, oh, he's going to vote for Donald Trump. I don't know which way he's going to vote. And he said to me specifically, that will be private between me and the ballot box. But it does, I don't know if you heard what I just had to say, does that still represent to me this deeper cultural shift in America, which is, big business, even if he were doing it for business, or celebrity, even if he were doing it to broaden his audience, or even if he's just simply someone kind of in touch with, and as you point out, you were at WrestleMania, and that is America. Like WWE is America. Even if he's someone in touch with America, I think it still represents a shift, because for the better part of, I would say, and you could address this better, but at least 8 years, anything that, forget conservative, forget Donald Trump, anything that wasn't far left was described as crazy. Anything that didn't, full-throatedly endorse Joe Biden was seen as a threat to democracy. And that's what they're still saying on The View. And that's why they're criticizing him. They're not criticizing him because he endorsed Donald Trump. They're criticizing him because he's not endorsing Joe Biden, and therefore he's potentially open, they're saying, to a future that destroys democracy. And I think what this moment represents is no one's buying what you're selling anymore. Right. You're losing normal America. Your crazy prism of the world is not a monopoly view of America.
And there's a reason for that. People know what they see with their own two eyes, Will. So we can go with what the Democrats say to us is true, or we can go with what we see to be true. And I trust Americans and their essential wisdom and their eyesight to know what they see and to vote on it. That's what's happened with the border. 9 years ago, when Donald Trump elevated the border into the national consciousness, he met with international criticism and ridicule. He was called names. You're never going to win. We're going to win Hispanics forevermore as Democrats. The opposite has happened, because many Americans now are saying, well, hold on. I'm watching what's happening. You're letting over 8 million people in roughly population larger than 39 states in this country. And they're coming here, and that's not fair. That's illegal. But then they're saying, and when they get here, you give them cash, cell phones, clothing, shelter. You give them my kid's seat in the classroom in the second grade in New York City. this is not just fair. This is un-American, and this is not the way things are supposed to be. We are a compassionate, generous nation, among the most, absolutely the most in the nations in the world's history. You can come here legally. 34 million and counting have. So people are watching this. They're watching groceries and gas increase. They're watching crime. They're watching Ukraine. They're watching Israel. But they're also being called names themselves because of their political beliefs. You have a president of the United States in Joe Biden who has said mega MAGA, who, with a Marine behind him stationed in Philadelphia, gave an official speech as our commander-in-chief to basically castigate and denigrate a very large percentage of our nation. We can't have a president that does that. And so people are rising up. They're also, and this is why I also say, like, you can talk about Joe Biden's bumbling, stumbling, mumbling, but everybody sees that. The art of politics is not to tell people what they can see, but what they can't. And what they can't see is that, or don't remember, is his chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, killing those Keystone Pipeline jobs on week one out of spite, how he has emboldened a nuclear capable Iran, delisting the terrorist groups as terrorist groups, and saying, let's get back in the JCPOA. So I think everywhere you look, people know this is a man-made crisis, but it only takes a few rocks in the world, honestly, Dwayne Johnson's to say, hey, I endorsed him last time for a reason. I'm not doing it this time for the following reasons. Last point, I think it doesn't get enough coverage that one of the reasons, and you touched on this before I came on today, so I want to mention it. One of the reasons that Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans and even African Americans are leaving Democrats and considering voting Republican if not for Donald Trump, in addition to the border and crime and public safety and the schools and certainly the war, the economy, it's the open hostility to religion and religious people that the Democratic Party has displayed for years now. They don't realize that if you walk into a Catholic church on a Sunday in many of our suburbs, you see the pews filled with multi-generations of Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans. African Americans are worshiping for hours at a time in their churches. And so that's the way you spend your Sundays, if that's very important to you in your life and your decision-making process and your values, it's going to be important to your politics as well. And the Democratic Party is openly hostile to religion. Prove me wrong. They offer thoughts now. They can't even say thoughts and prayers.
So you said so much there that I want to respond to, but one of the things I want to say is, and we'll leave The Rock here in that interview, and again, you can go watch the whole thing, the full hour, on YouTube or listen to it on Spotify or Apple, is that he said to me, look, he said the same thing you did, Kellyanne, and it's something that's like really core to who I am and why I do this and what I believe. He said to me, I believe in Americans. Like, I do. I believe in the inherent goodness and capability of Americans. And look, I don't like making things overly partisan, but that's not the message you receive when you listen to Democrats. It's almost like this disdain for Americans, this scolding, we need to change towards Americans. And I just believe in the fundamental goodness and capabilities of American. So do you. And by the way, so does Dwayne Johnson. But now I want to move to this because you started to go here back to the normalcy thing. I think it is reflected in what you said. And we did it on Fox and Friends weekend, this past weekend. Black voters have dropped from 90% support to, I believe it is 68 or 61%. It's a huge drop in support for Joe Biden. Hispanic voters now below 50%. And here's a big one. Young voters, the voters under 30, he's shed another 10% among young voters. And so I think you have highlighted to us all the reasons for that being the case, that he is bleeding all of these voters. What I want to ask you, though, is what is the fallout from that, Kellyanne? So Joe Rogan on his podcast made a prediction, and I have no idea that he would have any insight, but he said by May, his prediction was May, they will replace Joe Biden, and it will be Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris. Do you think Joe Biden will still be the Democratic nominee for president in 2024?
I do. I mean, the odds are that he will be. I understand you do a switcheroo. It's actually easier under the Democratic Party rules to do that than it would be in the Republican Party. But they're running out of time, and they're so invested in Joe Biden. Let's just say, Will, that they replace Joe Biden with someone else. Do you think that the rest of us aren't going to make whoever he or she is eat and own all of the Biden policies? And the fact that whoever that is never stood up, never stood in the breach and said, hold on, this party's going in the wrong direction. We are so far out of sync now with where America is on spending government money that we don't have on things we don't need, what they've obviously done with defunding the police, what they're doing with the foreign wars, the border, the list goes on and on. So what Democrat is going to be able to stand up and confidently and competently tell America, tell these swing voters, Will, that I'm the one who went against Joe Biden? No, you didn't. You're the one who replaced him. There's a big difference. And if it's someone like Gavin Newsom, we add onto his shoulders all the failings and flailings of a beautiful state called California that he's presided over. So I understand why they want to get rid of him. My advice to Democrats was get rid of Biden and Harris a year ago, roll the dice, probably lose the presidency in 2024, but make Donald Trump the face of the opposition and rebuild your party back to what it was, the party of the worker, the party of the downtrodden, those who literally are in the minority numbers-wise in our nation, and the party that was always looked upon as a little bit more reasonable than they are now, and always elevating and electing young people. JFK, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, even Jimmy Carter, God bless him, Will, he's 99 now, but he was 52 when he was elected. That's a young man. And so 52. Now they've got back-to-back Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. So it makes no sense, but I hear you completely, but how in the world would they do that? And the big question is, are you also getting rid of Kamala Harris? Because she's even less popular than Joe Biden. And I will tell you right now, what scares many people, even some who have a tiny little bit of sympathy for Joe Biden, is a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Kamala Harris, possibly for 12 years. That scares many people.
My only rebuttal is that there are no good answers to the questions you ask, but the answer that you're left with is one that just increasingly looks like certain loss, Joe Biden. And by the way, on Gavin Newsom, I hear you. Like, on paper, you have to own the Democratic policies of the last 4 years, plus you have to own California. On paper, that's an obvious loser. But I will say I do not underestimate Gavin Newsom. I do not underestimate his ability to get before a podium with a bad set of facts and spin his lies and ways into a win. I think he is, in that way, this isn't a compliment, in that way, he is a very good politician. I just do not underestimate Gavin Newsom.
No, I don't at all. And he obviously wants a future in Democratic politics. And I think he did a smart thing by telling the Biden team, I'm going to be a surrogate for you, raise money for you. He showed up at the Fox News debate in Simi Valley in his home state of California, at the Reagan Library, went on a couple of Fox shows, has given an interview to Sean Hannity, has debated Ron DeSantis on Fox News. Pretty clever on his part. But I think why wouldn't he have also decided by now, like, I can't be the person who shoves out the first female vice president of color. Someone else has to do that. I'm not going to do that. And so it would have to be something that Biden agrees to. It would have to be something Kamala is comfortable with. And even then, I just still think it's back to your original point, which is the Democratic Party, not just Joe Biden. The Democratic Party has veered so far, of course, to where it once was, but also from where America is. And I don't understand that. Biden's got enough reasonable, smart people around him. The only thing I can say is that the prospect of Donald Trump coming back to office so infects the brains and the bodies of otherwise decent people that they say and do things they can't possibly believe or possibly think is in the best interest of America. The best example I have is the one that most Americans are telling pollsters like me now in focus groups and in quantitative polling, Will, is the most important issue to them, which is the border. They just don't understand. And remember, an open border is a proxy for many things. It's a proxy for economic unfairness. It is a proxy for national sovereignty, for security, safety, fairness, the drug crisis, fentanyl, the number one killer of 18 to 45-year-olds in our nation. So and yet the Biden people have to be reading the same polls the rest of us are. His approval rating, his disapproval rating in terms of handling issues, worse. The worst one for him is his handling of the border, second to his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. So the border he inherited, the Israel-Hamas war fairly new, and on both of them, he's just struggling mightily.
And the two things that they're going to attempt to run on, what it appears to be, is that Donald Trump represents a threat to democracy and that Donald Trump is going to push a national abortion ban. Now, that looks like something that was undercut today by Donald Trump. He put out a statement, he put out a position on abortion. in which he said, I want exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And he also wanted it left up to democracy and a state-by-state basis. So, when I did the interview with The Rock and the way people on the left have distilled that, they're like, oh, okay, I guess The Rock, if he's not going to endorse Joe Biden, is okay with, a national abortion ban. Does that put an end? Tell me what you think of Donald Trump's positioning on abortion. Does it neuter one of the left's two big arguments? And what does it do on the right?
First of all, he is the most pro-life president in history. It took a true convert, a Manhattan male billionaire real estate executive for whom most of his adult life had been pro-choice, became the most passionate, emphatic, and active, action-oriented pro-life president in American history. First president, much to my surprise, first president to ever address the March for Life in person. He did it several times. I was there. So, and then all the gains. And he starts out today's video saying, I want to reaffirm my support for IVF, and went back to the Alabama example. Then he said, I'm why Roe versus Wade was overturned. I did that. It's my three justices. He said that many times. So he is reaffirming his commitment to Roe no longer being the law of the land, which means there's no federal constitutional right to have an abortion. What Justice Alito said in the Dobbs case almost 2 years ago, Will Kane, is that this issue should go back to the elected representatives who are closest to the people. He did not say you can't have a federal minimum standard, like say 15 weeks, so that babies in Gavin Newsom's California or J.B. Pritzker's Illinois or Kathy Hochul's New York, for example, don't die at 34, 35, 39 weeks, which is the law. But I think President Trump, and I talked to him this morning after he put out the statement, I certainly talked to him along the way before the statement, he wasn't hearing from a lot of United States senators and Senate candidates that they were going to put that on his desk as president. Now, if they change their minds and they do that, then perhaps it's different. But right now, right here, he removed the left's lie, should have removed their lie, that he's for some kind of big ban and that the states don't have any rights. They still are lying about him. They're still lying that he wants to ban abortion. But I don't question that he's pro-life, and I think he should be credited as pro-life. And there are lots of pro-lifers. I'm one of the, I am 1,000% pro-life, but that's just not where the country is. And I think to move hearts and minds, we should be talking about 15 weeks, if for nothing else, as a conversation starter. Why? If Kamala Harris in the vice presidential debate is at 39 weeks, ask her a couple simple questions. So, my exceptions. What are yours? Name your exceptions. There are babies being born, Kamala Harris, in your home state of California at 24 weeks, 23 weeks. They have names. Here are their names. 3 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old now. They're citizens of California like you are. Vice President Harris, could we get you from 39 weeks to the point at which they were born in your own state? And if people say, well, that's not pro-life, you're not listening, everybody. I got it. But that's not where the country is. To get them there eventually is to show them that the left are a bunch of science deniers. They knew enough to mask up your 5-year-old kid for the better part of 2 school years. But you show them a 5-month-old sonogram, like, I don't know what it is. It's like, let me help you. That's the male organ, and the baby sucking his thumb and waving at you. So I know a lot of pro-lifers will be very disappointed today. But also, if you're in one of the states, and there are many that have no abortions except for life of the mother, South Dakota, I believe Arkansas, a bunch of others, then President Trump just said to you, that was your right. In the state of Florida, there's now 2 things. It's either the 6 weeks that Ron DeSantis signed into law as governor, or it's his new ballot initiative, which, as I read it, has no guardrails at all. They're saying, do you agree or disagree with a state constitutional right to an abortion? And someone's going to say, well, yes, but there are no exceptions in what I read. And so that would be worse position than pre-Dobbs. But I think it's important for him to reaffirm a cultural life. And I will tell you that there are a lot of senators and Senate candidates and House candidates and others, and certainly there are consultants telling them, this is why you lost in 2022. It's never because of the consultants, by the way. This is why you lost in 2022. You're going to lose again in 2024 unless this is taken off the table and we talk about states' rights. But I will give this little warning. For those who are running and for Senate and saying, or House and saying states' rights only, then you have to ask yourself why you're talking about school choice and charter schools and school board elections and policing and crime. Those aren't just states issues. Those are local issues. And I want everybody to talk about everything. I want us to talk all day long about how the left defunded the police. But that's not a federal issue, is it? It's a state issue. It's actually a local issue. So we have to be a little bit careful. And I think at the same time, we have to create this culture of life at all times. And President Trump, I believe, and someone who knows him well, worked side by side with him as the most pro-life president in American history. And someone I talked to today, I believe he's going to continue, as he did in that video, for fight for life and a culture of life. I believe life begins at conception. Not everyone in this country believes that.
You spoke to him this morning. You worked with him side by side in the past. Will you formally work side by side again with Donald Trump?
Let's see what my best and highest use is. Obviously, I worked for the country while working for President Trump and Vice President Pence. And I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing serves the country the best I can. But I think, and President Trump says this all the time because there's all these stories about personnel and this one, the other one. He says all the time, said it to me very recently, everybody has to put their head down and win. And I don't work for his campaign. We're very close to him, very proud of the work we did in 2016, very critical of his 2020 campaign. I think 2024 for President Trump is the best combination, Will Kane, because he has that hunger, swagger, underestimated underdog, feistiness and ethos back with a presidential record that you can compare to Biden's record. And he's going to have enough of the funding. And he's got these swing state polls going his way. He's got a lot of folks who didn't vote for him before, or didn't vote for him in 2020 at least, who are giving him a second look. Biden has a little bit of advantage on the money right now. The Democrats have a huge advantage on the mechanics and the process and the ground game. Hopefully that's turning around. But I fear that they who control the mechanics and process control the outcomes. And that just means that they're getting people out there ballot harvesting and early voting and all of that. They're more interested in that process and power than ideology and policy, for whom to vote philosophically and why, meaning for policy wise, why. They're more, they gave us Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, John Fetterman in the space of 2 years. So they're not even pretending to want the most qualified people to hold public office. And we should believe them when we see them.
I really like when you say Will Kane, when you use my first name and last name. It's like you've grabbed me by the lapel and say, listen to this point, Will.
It's sort of
really
Kellyanne,
talking to you now.
The whole thing, so yeah.
Last thing with you, Kellyanne, then I'm going to ask you, and then you can answer it how you want. Who's going to run with Donald Trump as vice president?
So I think more important than who is what. What is the job description? What does he need? First and foremost, it should be somebody who helps him win and helps him govern. And that also means that he or she, is not a distraction. President Trump should not be held to account for the vice president's statements or record or anything else. So that kind of trims the list. I wrote an op-ed in the New York Times a month or two ago talking about how he should definitely look at candidates of color. So I know he's considering Byron Donalds or Marco Rubio and some others. He certainly has he has some women on the list. He has some governors, some senators on the list. He has some business people on the list. My new favorite, though, is to put on the list is Bill Hagerty, the senator from Tennessee, who helped us during transition, went over and served as the U.S. ambassador to Japan, our third largest economy. So he knows an awful lot about China. Former businessman, had helped to run and build the Boston Consulting Group, and now a United States senator from Tennessee. Why did I say this? He's really good on TV. He's great on all the issues. He has a businessman sense. I think he could beat Kamala Harris badly in a debate. And I feel like when Air Force Two pulls up in any foreign nation and Senator Hagerty and some others deplane, we would feel proud. We'd say, okay, I have confidence in his competence. I'm not a big fan of you need a woman, you need a minority, you need somebody this age, we need somebody who's qualified. Joe Biden showed us the cost and consequence that we as a nation pay every day, Will Kane, for saying, I need a woman, I need a woman, I need a woman. You can pick a woman if you want, but it can't be anyone like Kamala Harris. And so that's what we're up against.
Here's what I think
Donald Trump has an embarrassment of riches. I put in my op-ed Mike Pompeo, Marco Rubio, Tom Cotton, Katie Britt, Sarah Sanders, Christina, they're all in there. And then some people are recommending the Dick Cheney model. Somebody who wouldn't compete with Donald Trump and look at 2028 as their own. So that's more like the Ben Carson idea. And I think J.D. Vance is still on his list as well, the senator from Ohio, even though he's new to the Senate and I think doing a very good job there. I think he voted for Evan McMullen.
Right, he's important. He's important in the Senate.
Yes.
But that's actually where I was going to go. One name you didn't say is a name. That's fascinating what you just said about Haggerty. So, and something I hadn't considered. I've always thought that Tim Scott probably checked a lot of the boxes that you had described.
He's on the list.
Okay, you maybe just overlooked his
Sorry.
name. But,
sorry, he's on the list, and he's in my op-ed, of course. And he's a great.
He doesn't compete with Donald. He doesn't compete with Donald Trump. Like, he's not going to cause, like, the first thing you said is somebody that doesn't detract. Tim Scott's not going to detract from Donald Trump. But then the other way to go is ideological, which would lead you towards J.D. Vance. And he's very popular on the right, and he's very smart. But he's also in an important position in Ohio as a senator. I hadn't considered, to your point about competency, like, I think we have to do a much better job. We who speak in the media, we who are pollsters, we who are into politics have to do a much better job of understanding normal Americans. And normal Americans, I think, look this as, I think what you said, a competency crisis. Yeah, he's old, he stumbles. I'm talking about Biden. And yes, it's crazy ideologically, but they just want somebody who represents America competently. And I have to learn more about Haggerty, but if he has an impressive business background, I know he's a politician as well now. But I just kind of like that idea of, people that understand how to get things done, who have the right ideological bent, but are so competent.
Yeah, look him up. I mean, again, Boston Gonzalez Group. And full disclosure, I don't do any work for him. I'm addressing one of many people today. He's got his supporters and people from all around DC here, but I do that routinely for all kinds of senators. But again, I'm just saying, because look, politics is not about biology or even chemistry. It's about math and science. You just need more electoral votes than the other person. And it would be great to have this one, that one, the other one. I hope we see a female president in our lifetime, just not the ones who have run so far, and not the vice president we currently have on the left. But President Trump, he's being very deliberative about this process. He's cast a wide net. His short list will continue to be long. He may surprise everyone.
Yeah.
He may go with one of the more obvious choices that he's been considering from the very beginning, but will Kane, not for a lack of vetting and thoughtfulness and depth. And, everybody says, who will help me win? Who will help me govern is incredibly important. And when President Trump, if he were to get back there, just quickly, when you think about al-Baghdadi and Soleimani and a nuclear-capable Iran at bay and pushing back on Putin and Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un, we need somebody who's going to reinforce that as well. And that could be many people, there's no doubt. But I don't think it has to be a governor, or a senator, or a woman, or a minority. It's he can choose whoever he wants. And then you've got the Democrats stuck with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, unless, of course, what we discussed earlier comes true. And then they're just stuck with their record in the form of a new messenger.
I didn't know you, Kellyanne Conway, but it makes sense, at least to some extent, are a fan of wrestling and at least went to WrestleMania. I think if you were, I wish I would have known you were there, but that would have been a fun thing. I think it's Kellyanne, I think it's at the bottom of everything, like politics, entertainment, culture. Ultimately, you get babyface versus heel. Babyface versus heel, a big fight after a big show. I mean, it's wrestling. It's America.
It's a cultural zeitgeist. You got to look at the cultural touchstones to realize what's happening. And I like to say for years, I wasn't a political pollster. I was a cultural anthropologist. Most of our clients were non-political. They were Consumer America, Major League Baseball, American Express. I used to work for all these different Martha Stewart Living's on the media company. And that you learn the way people make decisions, how they spend their time, how they spend their money, what they do when no one's looking. And if you show me how people spend their weekend, I can probably tell you roughly how they're going to vote.
Oh, that's awesome. Let's do that next time. I want you to give me a proxy for a couple weekends and what that means for how they vote. Kellyanne Conway, always great to talk to you. Thank you, Kellyanne.
Great to see you, Will. Take care. Bye-bye.